Thank you. Thank you for coming. The new book, my brother Mark, who is here in the front row here, we collaborated, and he's done a lot of the artwork. You can see from the design that I'm gradually eliminating him. I've got him down now to just a very narrow strip. But anyway, this is from his painting, but we did. I want to read just a few of these. Mark and I did 2 books where he supplied the drawings, and I did the poems. And these are all animals. And I just so I'm going to give you some. It's probably futile to try to convey the beauty of the drawings from this distance. But anyway, you see it's the poem and a drawing. This poem is called "The Fly." These are all very short. They're all actually 8 lines long. But it really is as much as anything about a Venus flytrap, but it's called a fly. My little buzz, repeated endlessly, undoes a person's sanity. The competition's fierce to be Earth's most annoying creature, but I take the cup, or it takes me, since Mother Nature specially devised a plant with teeth and gut to shut me in and shut me up. And here is gorillas. You'd like us better if we were more like you, wore coats and ties, sported a watch and such? Or is it otherwise? Are we most fearful queer when hints of some near kinship strike you? As when, across the bars of our zoo cell, you peer into our mindful eyes and see your cousin Gil, who drinks too much, or Uncle Frank in front of his TV. And here is a sort of Audubon-esque heron. I'm called a waiter, although given my habit of standing idly by and just how hard it is to catch my eye, you may prefer to think of me as waiter. To the fish swimming round me, such distinctions will come to seem striking only later, since I'm of no account to them until they get the bill. And king cobras. Our ancestors, keen to invent a streamlined existence for themselves, shed through the years extraneous impedimenta like arms and legs and ears. Each of the band became a band, or rolled up tube, where life's necessities were packed, a few small vials of poison and a long digestive tract. And 2 more from this book. This is spiders. We run a string of small hotels. We're looking to extend our franchise, though we first must find a fitting slogan. Rest tonight and let us do the rest. We cover everything you'll ever need. We don't intend to lose a guest. Relax while we unwind. None of them sounds quite right. And finally, this is wasps. We're choosy in the company we keep. Our taste runs toward the raffiné and bare. Our homes are 1/2 paper, 1/2 air. There's not a milligram to spare on our wisp-wasted torsos, though you will find there a little poison pot, since we declare most visitors are easier to bear once they've been put to sleep. And I'm going to give you just a couple more animals here. This was the second book that Mark and I collaborated on, and this is a book called Toad to a Nightingale. The poem is called New, that's the G-N-U, the creature. No news of news is good news, it seems clear, since anything you're apt to hear will deal in shrinking habitats, declining populations. It's a sad story, human new relations. You steal our food and homes, and that's no way to treat anew, unless you'd have us be forever mute as our initial G. And finally, from this, I'm just going to read this, a poem called Fire Ants. To everyone who has been stung, we offer you utmost apologies. And though we might just mention the poisons, flames, floodings we've been subjected to, by you. We won't. Or note that you began it. We merely ask there be no further intervention while we conclude our nature-given task, the conquest of the planet. And I'm going back. I want to stay with animals for just one more minute. I'm going to read a poem called Rabbits, and it's a Valentine, and it's all about the amorous habits of rabbits. So, deliberate on the rabbit, who, if what you hear is half true, has found the way to inhabit a world without elaborate courtship, yet one flushed with piquant, concupiscent satisfaction, a world whose slack, meadowed moments sit suspended between frequent bouts of rabid, raptured action, males of splendid, near-heroic virility, females of a commensurate, magnificent fertility. Ponder the shy but quite able go-getter, for whom even sex is not complex, who meets and mates and keeps no count, but sees the flesh of his flesh both diversify and multiply, who does not tire for long, and with the great outdoors as his table, banquets on fresh greens as he waits for the desire to mount. Consider this suitor of sorts, who advocates a direct style, who sharp on fundamentals, and in a twinkling his little heart kicking is hard at it, who gets and forgets while composing no explanations, damnations, grand pleadings or vows, disengages and instantly begins to browse, lifting to all eyes his eyes, oh, those lovable black bunny eyes, innocent and intelligent. And I'm going to read three more. It's, one is always dreary when one's sort of boasting about one's ailments, and yet, it's an irresistible thing to do. And we all have our vanity, but one of my particular vanities is I'm absolutely convinced in this room, I am the worst insomniac in this room, and it doesn't matter who you are. I can beat you at that, pathetic competition. But anyway, I wanted to read three little insomnia poems where objects that are normally not threatening in the daytime become sort of weird and strange at night. So here's a refrigerator, but if it works out, this comforting thing, your refrigerator, is no longer so comforting. A light turns on inside you like the light in it, and you half wake from your half doze. It sleepy hums the sated hum of someone who ate nearly everything. It ate the halibut, the ham, the jello, the ragu, the jam, the fake crab roll, the capers, ketchup, frozen wedding cake, and goes on humming while it grows hungry for you. And here is a little poem called Smoke Detector, and part of the pleasure when Mark and I were collaborating was, and he said I was doing it deliberately, and maybe I was trying to find things that were absolutely impossible for him to draw, and he said this was my best achievement ever was when I came up with it. I wanted him to draw a smoke detector. He said, I don't know, maybe you can think of a more boring object visually, but anyway, here's a smoke detector. There's no fire without smoke, so I'd insist to the insomniac, for whom my bead of light, dim as a cigarette puffed in the dark, tenders a message. It's all right. Stove's off. Furnace hasn't exploded yet. Lightning must have struck some other location. Mice haven't eaten the wire's insulation. Your daughter's former boyfriend is no arsonist. And I'm just going to read a few more poems, but I wanted to read, this is a poem that I came up with a phrase, and these things always sort of interest me what is the origin of a poem, or where does this thing come from? And I had this idea, I just loved the phrase, it was meandering Neanderthals. And just the sound of it, and the meander and the neander, I was at a scholarly sort of conference, and I proposed that, and I said, somebody here needs to write a poem, with meandering Neanderthals, and you just the slackers I hang out with. But I went back a few years later, and nobody had written. I mean, though I'd given them a first line. So anyway, at this point, I thought I had to do it myself. So this is, but picture, if you would, the poem is called "The Birth of Injustice," and I had a sort of image. I got interested. I was reading some books about Neanderthals, and this notion that we come very close. I mean, I think they were still on the planet, I think, as recently as like 28,000 years ago. Anyway, but I had this notion of you're going extinct, and this doesn't feel good. Something's wrong, So here's a woman. It's called "The Birth of Injustice." Meandering Neanderthals keep bumping up against the glacier's high, invasive walls, whose blackened snout comes down to eat the ground underneath their feet. Which is the way now? What else but hunched despair's narrowing valleys, this gathering feeling of everything constricting? It's an old notion, nearly sensed from way back when. Somehow, this exorbitant venture of theirs, life, isn't working out. She's a brooder, this one, on her rock, who once or twice or thrice, no words for numbers yet, has laid a child to earth. They take the tiny body from your arms, and it goes down into a cold mouth we make ourselves, digging out the shape. The ice eats, the earth eats, and having set her haunches on a rock, she ponders the light. It's dawn or dusk, no language for origins or ends, and yet the sun is moving, and in her blood she knows, always their dwindling journey has been far too brutal. Something's not right. This big-boned figure, who subsists chiefly on cattails she prizes from the numb gray sand of a half-frozen pond, prefers, of course, the soft and steamy organs of horse or aurochs when those are in hand, not often enough. Not often enough, days warmly warm all the way through, when the wished sun rises up in your chest with the blaze of honey on the tongue. For you the ache and sting of it, sweet beyond any sounds a mouth might make. And I want to read, I guess, 3 more poems. The first of them is called, I'm going to read the first part. It's called "Two Summer Jobs." And it's taken, back when I got out of high school, I was working for the city of Pleasant Ridge, a suburb of Detroit, as a tennis instructor. So anyway, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was 18. But anyway, here's a story. I was about ready to go off to college, and this is in 1971. Tennis instructor, 1971, transformed. The high school graduate, now himself a teacher for the city. Not sure who my students are, or how exactly a tennis class is run. I show up an hour ahead of time. Odd, nobody here. But one by one they appear, and they're all women. Maddeningly shy, the truth is I'm more alarmed than pleased at this, although a number of them are pretty, and one, Mrs. Shores, extremely so. Mine's a small yet adequate domain. 3 mornings a week I hold court on 2 courts beside the railroad track, giving to those I can assistance and verbally patting on the back the irretrievably maladroit whose shots are always rocketing the fence. Occasionally a train hurtling to or from Detroit rumbles through, erasing everything before it fades into the distance. Distant but surreally vast, exclusive, quick to take offense, the big H, Harvard, which only last April accepted me, now conspires my latest crazy daydream runs to bar me from settling in a dorm because I typed "no class presidents, please" on my roommate's selection form. Just as I'm lunging toward the ball, a sniping voice within inquires, "What will happen in the fall?" The days are changeless, but the weeks pass, edging me closer to fall and school. Mrs. Shores, the day of our last class, gives a party on her patio, where I'm handed a glass-bottom mug, surprise, engraved with my name. Beer's offered. I'm too proud to confess I hate the stuff. It's hot as a blowtorch now, and not yet noon. The first slug of Stroh's goes down in a cool wash of cleansing bitterness. The party warms up, visibly. Ice crackles in the drinks. I'm nonplussed when Mrs. Binstock unfolds a tale which, though nothing you shouldn't say among men, is not exactly nice. My face, which lets me down without fail at such times, blushes. They laugh at me. Then, and this is odd, I am discussed in a fond but distant-seeming way, as if I were no longer here. The ghost accepts another beer. Mrs. Dow speaks of a friend's son who committed suicide after his first Harvard exam. A lighter flares beside me, and cigarette smoke crowds the air. Teacher don't allow any smoking. Freshened laughter greets sad Mrs. Klein's unlikely quip. Then from Mrs. Shores, what kind of writer do you want to be? How did she ever draw from me my one most private wish? I'm tempted to joke, but a stilled politeness in the air and the depths of her dark, handsome eyes forbid it. Yet when I stumblingly begin a pained, self-conscious reply, she is mercifully there to cut me off. Conversation drifts lightly away, as once more I find myself taking shelter in something that soothes as it puzzles me, a solicitude that's graceful, wise, and impenetrably feminine. I drain my mug. A white film adheres to the glass bottom and then bursts, disclosing these my students seated around me in the Michigan sun, the last of our lessons completed. Wobbly, I rise, drunk with successfully having drunk 4 beers, and wave goodbye, but forget the press to my racket. I'm called back amid much laughter. Once more, I gravely bid them all farewell. So long. It's been fun. And what a day this is. The air humming in my ears, the sun stroking overheads in the treetops. Now a second film breaks, revealing how the light-drinking leaves, the houses, cars, power lines, a peeling wooden fence, and the pavement's constellated stars are a network, supple and immense, and all linked to distant Mrs. Shores, who calls, but surely she is joking, never forget, the world is yours. And I'm going to read 2 more poems. This is the first of them. I was talking about, poems that begin with a phrase, that meandering Neanderthals. I always wanted to put into a poem the phrase tic-tac-toe tactic. And, it's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, if you try to maneuver your conversation around, to insert that into a conversation or maneuver the poem around. It's a poem called Valentine for Sheila, but I had an idea of just trying to write a sort of preposterous poem of all the how life will, it's a Valentine poem, life would be transformed, etc., etc. So, but anyway, there will be this moment you will find, tic-tac-toe tactic. If you could see your way, possibly, to favoring me, we'd see no mere shift in the weather, but an earthly turn deep as some novel inclination in the continental drift. All'd be altered if you could see your way. A cratered sun, a blazing moon made over, the dawn of far farther stars, celestial maps would need to be redrawn. And jollity, that's a joy to see, hoot owls parroting roosters in the pines, crowing in the new day with cocksure eclat. Pigments would fly across the supplemented sky, and into a world upended, hand in hand we'd saunter, and everyone understand their shortage of comprehension, and all sanguinary conflicts be, if not summarily ended, suspended. Out in the veldt, lion and lamb would dinner on tempeh and tofu. Out in Vegas, meantime, the normally self-contained slots suddenly would spill their guts and everyone go home a winner. And I'd construe for you a new tic-tac-toe tactic that would effect the overthrow of the long executive rule of X, leading onward the epoch of O. And finally, I want to read a poem. I've gotten I've written many pieces over the years, most of them for the New York Review of Books, about American popular song, and somehow it never occurred to me to actually, turn any of this into a poem. But I was very interested in Lorenz Hart, Richard Rogers' first partner before he took up with Hammerstein. And I liked all his sort of crazy rhyming, and so this is a tribute to Hart, and this is called A Good List. And the idea is, it's a sort of Insomniac's game, but it's drawing up a list of everything you've never done wrong in your life, and so homage to Lorenz Hart, A Good List. Some nights, can't sleep, I draw up a list of everything I've never done wrong. To look at me now, you might insist my list could hardly be long, but I've stolen no gnomes from my neighbor's yard, nor struck his dog backing out my car, never ate my way up and down the Loire on a stranger's credit card. I've never given a cop the slip, stuffed stiffs in a gravel quarry, or silenced Cub Scouts on a first camping trip with an unspeakable ghost story. Never lifted a vase from a museum foyer or rifled a Turkish tourist backpack. Never cheated at golf or slipped out a blackjack and flattened a patent lawyer. I never forged a lottery ticket, took 3 on a 2-for-1 pass, or as a child toasted a cricket with a magnifying glass. I never said err to mean or obstructed justice or defrauded a securities firm. Never mulcted, so far as I understand the term, or unjustly usufructed. I never swindled a widow of all of her stuff by means of a false deed and title, or stood up and shouted, "My God, that's enough," at a nephew's piano recital. Never practiced arson even as a prank, brightened church suppers with off-color jokes, concocted an archaeological hoax, or dumped bleach in a goldfish tank. Never smoked opium or smuggled gold across the Panamanian Isthmus. Never hauled back and knocked a rival out cold or missed a family Christmas. Never borrowed a book I intended to keep. My list once started continues to grow, which is all for the good, but just goes to show it's the good who do not sleep. So thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions or suggestions of improvements for the lines that complaints. Yes.
Why do you write so much about animals? I'm not complaining.
Yeah, well, good. No, I don't know. I don't keep them. I mean, maybe it's a compensatory thing. People hearing me insist, think that you must go to my house and, you walk past the turtle and over by the, and the iguana, and I don't have any animals whatsoever. I have some bunnies in my backyard that I don't like, but other than that, so I don't know. I mean, partly, but I do, and one of the interesting things, when I was putting the book together, it's the earliest poems in here I wrote when I was 18 or 19, so it's 40 years. I mean, I'm going back a long time, and it does help you identify. You don't necessarily know, I think, when you start, what things you're going to keep going back to. I mean, it is, in that sense, a process, to utter a cliche. I mean, it is a process of discovery, and I have found congenial writing about animals. And also, when I was working with my brother, it helped to, I mean, they're nice things to draw. They're fun to, so that was probably part of it. But I've done that throughout. Yeah.
When you go back and put in something that you wrote when you were 18 or 19 or 20, are you tempted to revise?
That's a real good question, and I hope everyone could hear. Are you tempted? I'm not. It feels very remote, those things. And what's difficult in trying to put together a book like this is you're trying to compare something you wrote at 20, and I'm partial toward that kid, the 20-year-old. I mean, I like him, and so I'm maybe more indulgent, toward it. But it's very hard. You look and you say, this is a poem that's not terribly wonderful, but, it's about my, uncle, my Uncle Philip. And, I always liked Uncle Philip, and this is the only poem anybody ever wrote about Uncle Philip. And if this doesn't appear, he's completely off the map in the poetry world. So it gets difficult. There really isn't. I mean, it really is done on a case-by-case basis, I think, of trying to figure out which things to include and which things not to. I certainly didn't come up with any system. I had to basically cut about half of the things and a lot of things I liked, but it's not a collected poems, it's a selected. And my mother was very interested in literature, and actually the book begins with her sort of high watermark. She published a poem in the Christian Science Monitor I think it was in the mid-50s maybe, and so I used that. It's the first. It's as a epigraph for the book, and so I certainly. I felt I was growing. She also wrote a juvenile novel, and but it was not a far stretch, or it was not a case of the fruit falling as far from the trees as it might. And I also she was which I just wrote a piece about poetry memorization but she would pay me a penny a line, and so I was it was partly what it was. I knew. I was a acquisitive, greedy person who wanted to go where the money was, and that's why I ended up here. So. Well, thank you. I'd be happy to sign books if anybody wanted me to. And again, thank you all for coming. It's a real pleasure.